and welcome again to the Executive Room podcast, where we delve deep into the minds of remarkable executives who have shaped the business world with their ideas and actions. I'm your host, Kimberly Afonso, CEO and founder of the KA Consulting Group, where we are partners and advisors to CEOs, founders, and the most influential philanthrocapitalists in the world with their visibility. It's an honor to have Jordan Levy join us today. Jordan is an EdTech entrepreneur focused on helping students bridge the gap between education and career. He builds companies that integrate real industry partners and mentors directly into the learning process, giving students hands-on experience through real projects with real stakeholders. Jordan is the CEO and founder of CapSource, a platform that enables academic institutions and industry partners to design, manage, and scale high-impact experiential learning and early career hiring programs. Through its software and services, CapSource supports case-based, project-based, and mentoring-driven programs that help emerging talent build skills, expand networks, and move confidently into the workplace. Since 2017, CapSource has facilitated collaborations between more than 3,000 industry partners and 25,000 students from over 150 global universities and academic institutions. Jordan began his entrepreneurial journey early, founding his first EdTech company, Real Time Cases, while an undergraduate at Lehigh. He was also named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. At the core of his work is a long-term commitment to closing the skills gap and ensuring students graduate workforce ready. So great. Thank you for joining us today, Jordan. I'd love for you to start by explaining some of the concepts of experiential learning and hiring for listeners who may not be familiar with them.
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. And it's great to be here. So one of the cool things that we did when we first started organizing these experiences is kind of define a framework for both the industry side of our platform and the academic kind of student institution side of the platform. And so I think that those visual aids very much help, but I can kind of walk through them conceptually so that you'll have a good understanding. So experiential learning is really about giving, learners, and I always say, like, the Kolb model of experiential learning is kind of, David Kolb was like the original kind of ideator and framework builder of what experiential learning is. It really applies to people all throughout their lives. Like when you're a kid, almost everything you do is experiential learning because you don't have any experience doing anything. So everything you're doing is very much with your hands and engaging with the environment and trial and error and trying to get up and falling and trying to avoid the edges of the coffee table, and like that's all experiential learning. You learn after you hit the edge not to do that again, and that's like kind of the easiest example. But as you get older and more mature in your academic and professional career, experiential learning needs to be like very carefully designed. And so for us, it's really all about using like universal transferable skills and your technical skills in your areas to develop real outcomes for real stakeholders so that you could walk away with reference-worthy experience. Reference-worthy experience to us is like, you have to be able to showcase that you have organizational knowledge, like that you actually know about the organization that you worked with. So all of our project-based experiences are directly integrated with organizations. All of our cases are based on real organizations. So the idea is that students are actually getting a chance to work on real projects that they can add to their resume. And so by referring to it during job interviews and in cover letters and in their applications, they're reflecting on sharing and showcasing the actual outcome that they generated for the stakeholders that matter most, the real organizations out there. And really, experiential learning can happen with small mom and pop stores around college institutions, like a coffee shop or a pizza place. It can happen with nonprofits in the local community or greater environment. And then it can happen with, more traditional SMBs and corporations. So there's so many varieties and examples of different implementations of experiential learning, whether it's NYU, schools, Wagner School of Public Administration, like they do public policy and financial planning for nonprofits and urban planning. And that they get to work on such cool projects for nonprofits and social impact organizations. And then you have other examples where you have BYU senior level undergrad engineering students working for a year on an engineering challenge, whether it's mechanical, manufacturing, electrical, computer. So experiential learning is like really emphasizing the importance of connecting students with the industry organizations so that they can walk away with experience that either informs what they do want to do more of or what they don't want to do more of before they get through their academic program and start really diving into the weeds of solving real industry problems. And as you know, that's what you get paid for, is to solve problems. The more complex problems, the more you get paid. So the other side of the framework is experiential hiring. And for us, it's really just about being able to help employers build their employer brand. It's about helping them assess talent from both a perspective of culture fit and capability. And you can really do that in such a great way using these types of project-based approaches and case-based approaches, which really allow next-gen talent to showcase what their capabilities are and invest enough energy to really confirm that they're interested in doing that type of work. So that's, it already is costly to hire. It's even more costly to make a bad hire. If you use these types of assessment processes, especially with next-gen talent, it might not be that they're going to stay with you forever like the old days, but at least more than a year, 2 years, right? If you can really make sure that there's a match, you'll get 3 to 5 years out of everyone that you'll typically get, 18 months or less if you don't engage in this type of hiring practice. So it gives you a little perspective. They feed really well into each other. And then we also talk about very much how the institution, and this is kind of like what our work is all about, is really helping institutions see themselves as a crucial piece of this ecosystem. So obviously, us, our competitors, we're all trying to provide tools to do this, to make it scalable, trackable, more effective, more efficient. Schools need to see themselves as key intermediaries to accredit, to organize, accredit, and provide assurance of learning for these types of experiences. So we work with schools to set up all that and scale that and really make sure that they can deliver these not just once to students, but hopefully, once every semester is really our big, bold vision.
Very, very well said, Jordan. Thank you for sharing that with us. And amazing on so many fronts, especially the hiring. That's one of the things when you were speaking that stood out, as that makes a huge impact. Being able to go from 18 months to 3 to 5 years. Can you tell us a little bit about the impact you've seen with that, and also with everything else you've mentioned? I know it's making a ton of impact across, the industry and academia, but tell us a little bit more about that.
So we measure impact in a lot of different ways. Obviously, in a very individual student basis, and there's really 3 stakeholders all the time. It's institution, educator, facilitator, it's the student learner, and then it's the industry organization. So, the net promoter score, I would recommend this to, a friend. That's always a really important indicator that things are going well. But when you dive deeper, it's, how students reflect on these experiences, the gratitude that they have for getting a chance to do this. And, often sometimes watching the students when they get into their field acknowledge that, wait, maybe I'm heading in the wrong direction. That's really why I ended up working in this space. I studied accounting and finance. I was really good at it from a textbook perspective, but I had no interest in being part of that accounting and finance beast in New York. And I just kind of hopped on that train because that's what my friends were doing. And I was doing well enough in classes that no one would ever say, are you sure this is what you want to do? But because I didn't get one of those applied learning experiences, by the time I got my internship at KPMG, I realized, oh my God, I don't want to do this. So, the amount of students that realign, I think, I always say one of the best deeds you could do is set up someone, with their partner and they have kids. The next best thing is to set them up with a career that's going to help them earn but also be engaged and feel fulfilled. And when you're earning, engaged, and fulfilled, you're going to be a better contributor to the community, your community, and the larger community we all live in. So it's retention of partners. It's obviously the increase of the amount of students that we're able to reach every year. It's the earning potential of those students within a few months, a few years, whether or not they were able to secure that first job, within 6 months of graduating, how quickly they get promotions, whether or not we can help academic programs find sponsorship from industry organizations. So that's a big new area of our business is, schools need financial support to run these types of programs. It's not the same as, sit in rows and let me tell you what's in the textbook. It's you're using AI and 15 other school resources to drive real outcomes to industry organizations. If those outcomes are worth, the time that the students and faculty and institution is spending on it, then there should be some willingness to invest to offset the costs for students and families and to help reward faculty for doing a good job facilitating that. So that's kind of my hope and vision for the future of higher ed is, especially now with AI on our doorstep, it's, these students can answer anything. And they don't need an educator to teach them. They have personalized education like a calculator became available 40 years ago. That's what's in everyone's pocket, but for everything, right? So where does education differentiate themselves as being able to create and offer these really high impact, bespoke, industry integrated, career aligned, experiential learning opportunities for students where you're working with different types of industry professionals of different levels, different cultures, working with your peers from different places in the world and getting a chance to work in a team and show that you can use these tools to deliver impact. And like I mentioned, the more complicated problems you can solve, the more you're going to get paid.
Completely. And I think that those were such great examples, Jordan. I can completely relate as well. On my journey in college as well, I didn't figure out that, big corporations aren't for me. It took an internship to get there. I think a lot of experiential things can help you figure out what is best for you beforehand. So I find those to be really, really great examples that you shared that really show the impact. And I'd love to hear more about your entrepreneurial journey. You were on the 30 under 30 list, so congratulations. And you started as an entrepreneur really young. So tell us more about that. Has it been something that always came natural to you? How did you come up with your idea for CapSource? And where in general has your interest in talent development come from?
I took an experiential learning entrepreneurship class at Lehigh. And the one amazing thing about the course was, I was a student that wanted to get A's, so I was going to do whatever I needed to get an A. And this particular course, the A was contingent on making progress on a business every semester. Every class rather. So literally every single class you had to have done something between last class and this next class. And, first, I think one thing that I learned very quickly is when you choose the wrong idea, that's when, especially my professor as a facilitator, his name was Josh Eric, he's still at Lehigh, helping students do the same thing over and over again since I graduated. He knew very quickly that I was working on the wrong thing because I was just begrudgingly getting more info and then hitting dead ends and getting frustrated. And the first thing he said, he's like, why don't you work on something else, something that you have expertise and interest in? He's like, we all know this, but you have to love your customer. Even if you hate the way things are, you have to love your customer. And I love learning. My dad is an amazing, he's an amazing contributor, individual contributor, but he really doesn't work well in teams. He's not a good teacher. And so both my sister and I both ended up in education because we gravitated towards our educators because they were our saving grace and helping us learn what my impatient dad couldn't teach us, right? So I think that was a really cool opportunity for us to really soak in and learn kind of how to approach things and find people. And then, really because I developed these great relationships, I just started asking my educators, what if it was easy. Like, why don't we work with real companies? I'm studying undergrad business. Why aren't we working with real companies like all throughout our program? It's difficult to coordinate. You can't just buy it off the shelf, is what I learned. And then I was like, well, what if you could? What if you can literally buy students industry experience off the shelf? Would you be interested in that? And that was really the first kind of foray. Is like we created the case studies first. That's what real-time cases were. And it was just like we got to, I was still unsure of what I wanted to do because I realized I didn't want to take my full-time position at KPMG. And I realized that if we just emailed CEOs and said, hey, it doesn't cost you anything, but we're going to make a case study about you. And we want students to work on your, whatever challenge you have, whether it's marketing, new product development, related to talent acquisition, operations, finance, accounting, like anything you want to give us. We recorded them as a series of kind of like different, videos and case support assets that essentially could be used for academic experiences. So, that once we had like a library, we're just going out to schools and saying like, hey, we could create custom ones of these with your alumni or with different centers on campus. Like that was we were much more of like a publisher entity. And then, during that process, I kind of learned, and we got a lot of funding to do this, which is what helped us get to, a lot of schools very quickly and really start validating things and build a tech product. Like among that journey, we had Fordham University in New York said, hey, we actually want to work with them. We don't want to work kind of through this case study, but like, is it possible for you to do the projects for us? And, this concept of like capstones and stuff had existed since the 90s. Most engineering schools accredited by ABET were requiring that students have some practical experience before they graduate and go start building bridges, right? So that's like required for engineering. It's required for med school. It's not required for business. And so the students that get it are very lucky, even still after us spending 10 years trying to integrate project-based learning into business, engineering, and all sorts of other areas of academics. So long story short is we were able to get into the rooms of CEOs, able to get them to engage with students in new and unique ways. Every experience that we've created is something that's net new for the entire economic environment we operate in. None of the companies are saying we're getting rid of our internship programs to do this. They're all saying we've never done anything like this. That sounds awesome. We'll try it out. And now 250 students have DoorDash on their resume because we put that together for them. But DoorDash wasn't otherwise going to offer that case competition that we helped them organize. So it's basically there's not nearly enough internships out there, even for the top performing juniors, rising seniors. So what do you do with everyone who's not top performing? And how do you help people, students, young professionals get these experiences early and often so that they can actually like validate, like actually, my dad's a doctor, my mom's a lawyer. I don't want to do either of those. All their friends are in those fields. How do I find what I want to do? Experiential learning. And that's really where schools and their responsibility to their students really, kicks into gear.
Really, really interesting, Jordan. And I want to go back to something that you said earlier as well. You made a really interesting point that you said people now go to AI first and validate the information afterwards. You also mentioned the example of used to be a calculator, now it's AI. Do you see the same shift happening in how students and educators approach learning? And what are you in general seeing right now with higher education that our listeners may not be aware of?
I mean, and I think it's a renaissance of learning. We really have. We went from a time like the original model of education was that the top thinkers, the elite of society that had the time and resources to not work and go learn, said, hey, I'm going to go to the people who are the biggest experts and they're at institutions and they need all this really crazy equipment and grant funding. And, that was the original way to get people into these really, forward looking fields. And then, throughout the 70s and 80s, women entering the workforce, they wanted to go to school. Student loans became more available. And so now you have a major uptick of students going to school. The schools did not change the way they taught. They just figured out how to make it more scalable. And so to make learning scalable, it was sit in rows and leverage these publisher textbooks. And you have experts that sit in front and know the information and challenge you. And then, kind of like over the last 25 years, YouTube came to fruition. And now that's like, the dawn of somewhat personalized learning. It's not personalized. It's actually just a big directory of learning resources. And where AI like completely changes the dynamic is that it is a true personalized learning experience for everybody. No matter where you are in your level of effectiveness or understanding of a topic, you can get incrementally better at your own pace if you can use AI and prompt it correctly. And so I think that's really the remarkable thing. And I don't think schools are set up for this at all. I think, we're still seeing a lot of schools say like, oh, we need to go back to the blue book where students are writing down answers so that we know that they're not using AI. And I'm like, that's not forward thinking. I think you have to change everything around the context of how you teach in order to make sure that AI is just a tool like it is in the workforce to make sure that students are effective with that tool in how they learn and use it to work. And I think if you're not doing that, then everything that we're doing, trying to assess whether students can recall information, it's completely, unless we go back to a completely analog age, that's never going to be necessary again. Carrying around, terabyte hard drives in our pockets that have access to unlimited information online. So forget that. And then it's not about recalling information, and it's also not about being able to choose among a set of answers, right? I think like even that form of assessment or writing papers, like that kind of assessment just isn't helpful anymore. It's about whether or not you can actually come up with new novel connections between concepts and actually propose, interesting, novel, unique solutions. That's where I see education going. I think, these frameworks of like shifting classes to be much more project and case-based and mentoring-based, I think really helps students understand who they are, what organizations are doing. It doesn't even need to be like some big for-profit company that's trying to, add another zero to their top line revenue. Sometimes it's like American Cancer Society is trying to figure out how to make their young professional ambassador board more successful in existing cities and launch new ones in new cities. And it's like, that's the kind of work that if you have any experience doing that, now you know what it's like to launch new products in new markets. Now you know what it's like to do sales and marketing. Now you know what it's like to build a plan and operationalize a plan. Those are the types of things that companies value. Those are the types of things students want to learn. And it's applicable to every field. My favorite is like doctors. We of course said, no, we're not going to let doctors graduate without real experience. And then they're the see one, do one, teach one style of experiential learning, which is the absolute best. And then everything else, it's like, well, I guess engineers should, but everyone else, it's a lot of work to do it for everyone. And I think it's like, well, it doesn't have to be. We need to build networks. We need to build connections, understandings between industry that relies on these institutions for talent pool to help them get involved more early and often with students. And that really helps to incubate local connection, keeping students where those schools are, and actually working towards really exciting new things together.
Definitely. And how far do you think we are as a society from, what you spoke about, having this available not just for doctors, not just for engineers, but giving this type of experiential learning across, all fields? How far do you think we are from that? Is it like really far off? Do you think that we could achieve something that is more like that in general soon?
I am surprised that it's not more prevalent after working on it for 10 years than I was hoping it would be. but I can't imagine that that's a forever thing, right? Because I think at the end of the day, it's like, there's a lot of resistance, and it's like, oh, well, higher education is not about workforce development. It's about being able to train people how to be strategic thinkers. And, my whole thing is like, I think you could do that while also training them how to be workforce aligned. Like if you're just teaching them how to be a big thinker and it's so disconnected from the working world, whatever that might be. I mean, there really is so many different fields, even doing like ocean pollution research. Like you can have students work on topics that are extremely important to our world. So I think like it's just important for students to get those opportunities. And if you're just trying to teach them without it, then you're not, I would say you're doing a disservice as an understatement, right? I think it's just being lazy in terms of education. So there's a lot of ways to do project-based learning that doesn't require outside engagement. And that's obviously easier for educators to manage. They're not used to managing this network of leaders, and then there's changes that happen at organizations. Sometimes organizations lose funding, sometimes organizations have change of leadership or change of point of contact, or there's a whole new contract that comes in and they change their entire focus. These are all learning experiences for students. They're all important in helping students understand how organizations operate. And it's like if you don't do that with them, then they're not going to have any experience. So I think it's imperative. I think that the higher education space is under the most pressure I've ever seen, maybe even the most pressure in history, probably highly likely. They're coming off of, the COVID transition. So that was a major shakeup of, just the calculation of what the value is of the education. It's like when you take the campus out, which is basically the fun part, what's left of a college experience is, a very difficult to value educational curriculum. Then on top of that, you have, of course, we've talked about AI, and then you have the birth cliff. So there's, significantly less graduating high school students entering college students than there was 2 years ago. And then you have the student debt crisis. So all these students kind of seeing what happened to their aunts, uncles, older siblings, friends, and sometimes often with the younger Gen X, like their actual parents got, $200,000 of debt and are still paying it off in their 50s. So if that's what's likely an outcome, or even if it's 30% likely that you're going to have hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and never be able to pay it off, that's a serious consideration for students that wasn't, between the 70s, 80s when student loans got popular and 2010, when I think the whole crisis became a lot more clear. So you got all these existential pressures. So I think that's really, it's TBD if this solution, if industry integrated learning and more cooperation between our academic institutions and industry organizations is the solution. I think it's an obvious yes, but it's still TBD. I mean, it's my life's work, so I'll be continuing to invest energy into it. But I hope that within 10 years, the growth of I think the most important thing is that you need to get this in high school. Some even argue in middle school, right? So then there's an entire other 50 million student population that needs to be addressed beyond the 20 million that are enrolled in undergrad and grad programs. They definitely need it because they're opting into these programs to get higher earning positions because they have more experience, knowledge, expertise to bring to the table. So you really have this it's almost a third of the country that's trying to get access to these opportunities. There's 1 million paid internships available every year. So it's like, what are we doing here? And I think the companies are willing to work with the schools. And that's one thing I've validated over and over. It's just really figuring out how to help the schools figure out how to incentivize their educators, how to structure these experiences, whether it's a week, a month, or a full semester or 2 semesters back to back and how they engage with industry. It's so flexible. You just have to be willing to bring yourself to the table and be a part of it. So I project it's going to be much more popular and demanded by families. I mean, the millennials are starting to raise their kids to a point where they'll be thinking about college in the next 10 years. So I think that's also going to add new pressure. So I'm excited to see what happens. I think we're set up as an organization with the technology and the experience necessary to be a key player in a very, I mean, it's a small market. There's not a lot of organizations that do this type of work. So TBD.
And we all hope that 10 years or sooner we're seeing this, because just from hearing you speak and seeing everything before I invited you on the podcast, Jordan, really clear how impactful what you're doing is. And I'd love to end the podcast. We always speak about vocal leadership on this podcast. I invited you on because you have an exceptional presence on LinkedIn. You're frequently on podcasts, in the media. I'd love for you to share what impact has visibility and your public presence had for your company and also other business opportunities.
I think that the more active you are in your business world, the more people ask you to help um, solve the problems in your community that are otherwise really hard to solve. And the truth is, like, the more you give, the more you get. Like, I think that, like, at the end of the day, if you have the capacity to give anything, time, talent, or treasure, it doesn't have to be money. Um, I think that's what really empowers you to be a community leader and to help inspire the next generation to get involved sooner and in more impactful ways. So it's like I landed in Tucson, and within a year I was on boards and starting to get involved. And that's the type of thing that I always challenge other people to do, is to figure out where they want to spend their time outside of their career and their family. And of course, it's like great to have fun, but if you can have fun and make an impact, then it's like you're not working at all, right? If you have fun, you're never working a day in your life. And I think that applies to social impact work and community, um, you know, uh, activity, as well as your professional pursuits. And hopefully, through doing, I mean, there's a whole use case of doing experiential learning with engaged philanthropy and working with nonprofits. How do you help young professionals find what organizations, what boards to be a part of? All of the We want to learn too. We're developing connection with this because we want to learn, what are they doing, what are their challenges, how can we help them raise more money, impact more people in their niche. And so I think I I see so many ways for this approach to actually impact the world beyond even just the traditional higher ed, undergrad and grad, target audience that we have now. And we're testing all those out. So that's what I'm really excited to see, is like other ways to get networks to work cooperatively together to really benefit the community and to repair the world, make it a better place.
Very well said, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So, really glad to hear about how committed to social impact you are, Jordan. Well, thank you very much for being on. Thank you for sharing so much about your industry with us. And until next time.